Welcome back to All for United WSC. It's been a while, hasn't it? Or it feels like it has. It's been a week and a bit, and it feels like ages because obviously we're going through the season. We're used to having a show every couple of days. Going off, it's been 10 days since our last show. That is a long, long time, and probably for the first time in a couple of years where we've not had a show within a 7-day window. So, yes, it's been quite a while. But as is usual with United, we've not had any announcements yet, any departures, any incomings potentially. We've not had anything, so it's been tough to try and put shows in. So we're kind of spreading them out a bit for you over the next kind of couple of weeks of the shows that we've got planned in, unless United decide to announce something, in which case we'll be live straight away with that one. As you can see, Jess and Barry returning to go through. You were both on the last show, weren't you? Because it was the awards one, I think, was the last show we did on here. So yeah, both on that one, both back again to talk through. This is probably not going to be as upbeat and positive, maybe, as the awards one, because we are going to be reliving some of those, I say some, nearly every 3-1 defeat that we had this season: City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Champions League, all that stuff. We'll potentially get into talking a bit about the contracts and things like that towards the end, because obviously that is kind of factoring in towards the back end of the season, because we've still got no renewals as of yet with those that are out of contract this summer. So we'll get into a bit of that as well. My first question then, I'll kind of just throw it over to you, Jess. Cast your mind all the way back to the pre-season. We're a week before the start of the season. We're going to Villa Park, all of that kind of thing. First game of the season against Villa. We knew we had the Champions League coming up. What was your expectation at that point? What was your realistic expectation for the season? We'd had what we thought at the time was a very good transfer window. We'd spent the most in the WSL. Where did you think we were going to end up in the season just gone? Did you think we'd maybe win a trophy? Where did you think we were going to finish in the league, and obviously the Champions League as well? Where were your kind of thoughts at the start of the season?
Wow, it is hard to remember that far back. I feel like I've lived about 5 lifetimes since then. Going back to sort of pre-season, I think we would have been pushing for that top spot again. Obviously, for me, coming second last season, I would have maybe thought, okay, whilst it would be great to finish first, obviously, I know what Chelsea are like. I know they're a fantastic team. So for me, it was just about pushing Chelsea right until the end again, like we did on the previous season. Unfortunately, that obviously didn't happen. I think, obviously, as well, I would have loved to have got some silverware, which we did actually do. So that is a bit of a positive. And then in terms of the Conti Cup, I would have liked to have seen us get just a tiny bit further, but we just seem incapable of ever progressing in that competition. And Champions League, I would have liked, again, to have seen us get out of that kind of initial game. I would have liked to have at least kind of got to the next stage. I think I was never under any illusion that we'd particularly push far in that competition, because it was our first time even being close to it. However, I would have liked to have seen us kind of overcome PSG, but they're a good team, and they themselves did well. So it was just sort of one of them, I think.
Yeah, and Barry, first same question over to yourself, because obviously me and you did the pre-season. I can't remember exactly what we said, but I'm pretty sure we both said top 3 in a trophy, I think, off memory. So yeah, I don't know whether you can cast your mind back to pre-season. Obviously, we had a fully fit squad, bar Emma Watson. I think at the time she picked up the ACL injury in pre-season, so it was a fully fit squad going into that first game, pretty much. What was your expectation? Can you remember back to that in terms of what you were thinking going into the season?
I think I can. I mean, I was floating on air at that point because we'd nearly won the league after me saying from the start that we were gonna. And the reason why I think I can remember it is because everyone was like, "Oh, he's going to do it again. He'll say that we're going to win the league," and I didn't. I think I said that we would finish second again. For that very reason, I wasn't convinced we were going to go on a big run and get the win. So I seem to recall saying that. So top 3 in a trophy is right. I'm pretty sure I said we'd like to win either the FA Cup or the Conti Cup, either or, to get our first trophy under our belt. And a bit like Jess, I think we were all hoping we were going to make the group stages of the Champions League. I think we're all lying if we were sitting there going, "Oh, no, we didn't expect to manage that." But I think we also understood how difficult that was going to be. It's not as simple as just you're talking about should be the best teams in Europe. So therefore, you're in a situation where that is a very tricky thing to do. But there was hope. So my hope was that we would progress in the Champions League. I expected us to win a trophy, and I thought that we would finish in the top 3.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the same. I think I put us third behind Chelsea and Arsenal, I think, going back. And obviously, I wanted us to win a cup. I said this season we had to go on and at least win something this season, whether that was the league or the two. I don't think we were ever going to win the Champions League. I don't think any of us was sat on here pre-season going, yeah, we're going to go on a Champions League run, because as Barry just said, the teams that were in it, obviously we didn't even make it into the group stages anyway on that one. Oh, hang on. Comment there just saying, yeah, I was hoping that Villa was going to help us win the league, and little did I know. That game of the season feels like, I mean, it is now, but like feels like so long ago, just even mentally, because I remember, obviously, we'll come back to it when we talk about the league. I want to start with the Champions League, but it was such a good moment. It felt very much like last season. We're going to do it again this season and go on a run. Obviously, we didn't, but we'll come back to that. Obviously, you both spoke about the Champions League, so we'll start with that, because obviously we did start the season, as I just said, obviously with the win over Villa. And then we did have the PSG games either side of. We had Arsenal just before that, which we'll come back to. But then we did have PSG, Leicester, and then PSG again. So in our first 5 fixtures, we had the 2 PSG games. Jess, I believe you were at the first leg, the 1-1 draw at LSV. What did you make of the 2 games against PSG? Because controversially, I think I tweeted this at the time, and I probably still stand by it. I don't think we were actually that bad in the Champions League this season. I actually think we did all right, particularly in the second half of the home game. I think in the first half of the home game, questions could definitely be asked. We were getting battered all over the place. How did you think we did in the Champions League overall? I said 1-1 in the first one, 3-1 loss in the second, and a controversial goal ruled out against Bolton in that second leg, I might add. Did you think we maybe weren't as bad, or were you kind of where we were expected in that competition?
I think if we're being realistic, it might be kind of what people expected of us. I mean, like, how many years did City qualify for Champions League to immediately get done what happened to us, basically? It's difficult for a team, especially a new team like United, to come along and with no real experience to then come up against kind of European greats. I think it's one of those that when we look back now, we can kind of say, oh, do you know what? It actually wasn't so bad. I think, Connor, like you said, we did really struggle at times, but I don't know how much of that is just kind of the occasion maybe getting to players, or just a lack of experience, not being used to playing against teams with different play styles and things like that. We're very much used to just playing the same teams. So it was kind of a big difference for us. I think we did play well at times, and we played ourselves back into the game. I think holding them to a draw at LSV in the end was a really, really good performance. And I think, a lot is to be said about that, and a lot of credit should be given to players. And I think, I can't remember, but ultimately PSG did actually do quite well, didn't they, in the end? They didn't do horrendously. So, it's not like they're not a good team. And I just sort of hope that moving forward now, it's given the players experience, and basically moving forward, maybe next time, if we ever get into that position again, we can make it through to the groups, because you don't want to be a team like City where basically you qualify every year and then just never actually get into the group stage. So it would just be really great if we can kick on from there when the time does come again. I think ultimately we've just got to look at it as kind of a good experience, basically. Unfortunately, things didn't go our way, but I think in hindsight, we didn't actually do too bad. I don't think we did ourselves a discredit, and I don't think we were embarrassed by PSG at any point.
Yeah, you just mentioned there, and kind of have highlights it, especially when you consider they did get to the semi-finals, PSG, so they didn't do too bad in the end. After obviously getting through against us, and obviously it's worth noting the teams that missed out on the Champions League group stage this season, Wolfsburg and Arsenal, all didn't make it this year into the group stage. There was a lot of big teams who got knocked out in the qualifying. Barry, how do you think we kind of got on? Because again, I remember doing the review show for the second leg. We were all on here obviously annoyed because the decisions in that game were pretty ridiculous. The golden goal that was ruled out for absolutely no reason, for foul on the keeper apparently, if I remember rightly, but there was absolutely no contact in it. Garcia also had a one-on-one that was ruled offside when she was clearly miles onside as well. So did you think we did okay against it? Considering this was our first time out, looking back, do you think that probably 3-1 defeat and a 1-1 draw, and especially because I will say the second half against PSG in the first leg, we were actually, I think if that game goes on for another 10-15 minutes, we probably end up winning that, because we turned that game around and we're all over them towards the end of that game. So do you think we did okay? Do you think we did better than you expected, or was it kind of what you thought might happen in those two games?
I don't know that we did better than I expected. I mean, I was disappointed not to make it through to the next round, especially having drawn in the previous leg. So we'd showed that we could match them in terms of getting a result and doing what we needed to do. I think the first thing I would say is that I was pleased because we got further than Arsenal this season, and that was what I wanted us to do. With Arsenal getting knocked out by Paris FC, a game that I did go onto the Arsenal website to watch and giggle heartily at, was the big thing for me at that point. I wasn't disappointed about, I was disappointed about going out, but I wasn't overly upset, because I know a lot of people won't necessarily take this view, but for me, it's a first. It's the first time we've made it into the Champions League. So what are we measuring that on? How do we measure whether that's a success or a failure? If you've made it there for the first time in your history, as it stands, it will always state that that is the furthest we've ever gone in that competition. It's the best we've ever done in that competition. Now, next season, if we manage to finish in the top three and we get it again, and we go out at that point again, then you start having the conversation that Jess was having there about City. Is like, well, why can't we make that step? Why can't we get into the group stage? What's going wrong? And at that point, you can then start having the conversations about, was it as good as the first year? Did we perform well? What is it that's going on? Is it how we set up? What is it that's causing the problem? But for me, for a first time, we didn't know what to expect. This is Europe. We've not seen Manchester United play really against European teams. We've seen them in pre-season friendlies, but they mean nothing. So, I think it was good that we'd had those, but the pre-season friendlies are not going to set you up for a Champions League game, especially not against a team like Paris Saint-Germain. So, yes, there was all the other bits. I'm not going to go into how the referees have mugged people off over the course of a season, because we know that happens in all manner of games. I think the key thing for me there is that is the best that we've done. And so for me, I what's the word that I often use for this? I'm apathetic really about it. I can't sit there and get overexcited because we didn't get very far in there, but equally, it's our first time. And so for a first time, you have to sit there and take that and go, we did reasonably well. We've gone out there, we've set a marker. In order to show progression, you've got to do better than that the next time that you're on there. And that's where the movement would be for me. So I'm not, somebody's going to have a go at me in a minute for using this word, I'm sure, but I'm not fussed. It's happened. It is what it is. We'll see where we are next time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I did kind of notice this comment a bit earlier on before I give my thoughts on it. Yes, Jesse's wearing what looks like the 94 to 96 third kit as well, which we were having a bit of a chat about that backstage. It is one of the best United kits, I feel like.
Costco value. Loved it. That was what everything was. When there was old blue and white stripes, the bags were like that as well. It was absolutely unreal. Should never have been sponsored by Sharp. We should have been sponsored by Tesco's that year. That was unreal.
Can you imagine? But yeah, back to the Champions League. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's kind of where I was. I was like, it was disappointing at the time. I remember doing that review show and it was massively disappointing after that. But I think that was more of a case of, which we'll come to in just a second, that month in particular was just maybe not a great month to start the season with. And I feel like, I said in the first, you said the Barry, we didn't know what to expect. I remember that first half against PSG at LSV. I was fearing the worst because we couldn't, I think James put this earlier on, we couldn't get the ball. We were getting absolutely torn apart, and I was thinking, oh no, like our first foray into Europe, we're getting absolutely battered. Luckily, obviously, kept the score down to 1-0, and that's what happens. You stay in the game. Mallard came on. That was one of the few times this season we've seen Mallard and James play together. And those two, to me, showed why they have won the Champions League and compete in it and have done for years. Because those two came on.
Is what Wayne's just put, which I think is a really good point there, was the thing that I remember saying this in the review as well. I know Skinner made a big thing out of it as well. But the fact you're playing Paris Saint-Germain in the knockout round just to get to the Champions League proper. Now, I know that the women's game is very different to the men's because you can't just look at the club names and go, oh, wow, they're brilliant. If that was the case, Newcastle would be in the WSL immediately, and they're not. So you can't quite have that level. But that is a big thing, that the Champions League does need some sort of looking at, because it did feel a little bit weird that you can have teams as big as that, or at least names as big as that, being put into the group stage. If you want more eyes on the product, you are going to have a point whereby, qualification is perhaps done slightly differently. And I don't know how they would do that. I can't give you the answer, but that was something that irked me a little bit, because that would have been a great game if that had been a quarterfinal, or one of the knockout games for the season, or even the 2 league games. Imagine that, a narrow defeat and a draw. Who knows? So, yeah, that was, I thought, a very good point that should have been brought up.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. And to be fair, another good point from Jay. I'm glad this was cut short at half time, and thank God we never saw it again, because poor Jade was getting absolutely just ripped to shreds. And I remember saying, you've got Karshawi and Chawinga, I think it was, on the left-hand side, and poor Jade was just getting absolutely battered. So I'm glad that we learned by half time that was not going to work, and we never saw it again. So I think experiment failed, I think, on that one. That was definitely not one to see. She did start in the second leg, but obviously at right back in an actual position, not a right wing, where we seemed to play her in that first half against PSG. Right, I referenced that month then, because like I said, I kind of asked you, Jess, in terms of, I guess, what you were thinking at the time in terms of where you were worried for the rest of the season, because we just narrowly beat Villa. We were a goal down in that one. Then Kirsty Hansen got sent off, and we did manage to turn that around late on with Garcia and Williams. We then drew 2-2 to Arsenal with a late equaliser from Lacasse. Obviously, had the PSG at home game. Then we drew at home to Leicester. Again, another disappointing another disappointing draw, where last season, the season prior, we'd won pretty comfortably and drew there. Then we'd lost to PSG. Around that time, were you a bit concerned for the season ahead? Because that's 2 draws in the league that we didn't already. And I remember saying at the time, that's our draw counter gone pretty much already, because the season prior, we'd only drawn twice, be it Everton and City at the time. So do you think that was maybe just that, again, it didn't really set us off on a right footing, did it? Whereas the season prior, we were winning. We got off to quite a few. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was at least 4 or 5 wins on the bounce. This season, the one just gone, it was 3 draws, one of them being in the Champions League, one of those being a late equaliser by Lacasse. And as James just said, both at home, the 2 league games, Arsenal and Leicester. Did that kind of not shape the season, because there's a long, long way to go, but I guess were you probably concerned at that point? Because, I mean, you look at October as a whole, it's those games I've just mentioned. Then we did go away to in fact, no, I'm going to incorporate 2 more. Sorry, I'm going to incorporate 2 more games into it, because it's kind of the same month. So after that PSG loss, we did go and beat Everton 5-0. Obviously, everyone's thinking great. And then we drew to Brighton away from home as well. So within that first month, I guess, do you think that set the tone, really, just how inconsistent we were going to be this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was just a lot of up and down, to be honest. I think because we, like you say, Connor, because we've done so well last season, getting that early draw against Leicester was a real issue. And I also think in some ways the draw against Arsenal as well. I remember being at that game, and I think it was Russo's first game back after all the drama of the summer. And I think we were obviously giving her a bit of beef all game. And then I think when they equalised, it was just like, oh, we kind of can't carry on doing that now, can we? So I remember singing, when it was 2-1, I remember people singing like, Luca, what's the score or something? And it was really funny, but then they immediately equalised. And I was like, oh, that's a bit embarrassing from us. And I think whereas the season before, we would have kept that lead. And like you say, at home as well, we wouldn't have given up that lead. And I think at that point, I was like, oh, not great. Better than a loss, obviously, but we won that game last year. And then following that, the PSG draw, we've kind of already been through that. Poor performance in the first half, but I was just sort of impressed that we managed to turn it around and keep ourselves in it going into the next leg. But yeah, the game against Leicester, I think that was it. That was our draw gone, like you said. We'd seen the season before how close to perfect you have to be. The season before that draw again, I think it was Everton, really basically ended it for us. That a team like Chelsea are not going to drop that many points, which means that if you want to compete for that top spot, you also cannot drop any points. So games against Leicester, Brighton, you have to win. There is no option. The season is too short. There's not enough teams in there to kind of have too many draws, basically, because a couple of games have dropped points and that's it. Your season can be over very, very quickly. I think I remember going to that Everton away game because I dragged my brother with me and he wore his Liverpool shirt, which was very controversial, but did make me laugh, to be fair. Anyway, at that point, I'm thinking, oh, do you know what? Maybe it's not so bad. 5 goals, really interesting game, fantastic, loved it. And then a couple of weeks later, draw again to Brighton. And yeah, definitely at that point, I'm thinking, oh, things are not going to be as easy as last year. So I think it was the inconsistency. I mean, it was the inconsistency that killed us, but it was the inconsistency from the start. And I think that just affected kind of everything, from morale to like the atmosphere. At that point as well, the players didn't seem to be kind of meshing very well together. I'm casting my mind back now to right at the start of the season, but everyone seemed to be shouting at each other all the time. And I know that did ease off a little bit, but I think it just summed up the whole season. It didn't really improve that much at any point. So yeah, those early games really didn't set us up very well for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and Barry, I want to throw it over to you. Obviously, speaking about the Leicester game, has just been referenced in the chat. Simon put it there. Obviously, Gabby, that's when Gabby George did her ACL injury, was 9 minutes into that Leicester game. Jade Riviere came on, then Jade also went down injured and went off in the 70th minute. So she came on for 60 minutes and then got subbed off herself for Gemma Evans in that instance. I know that because I've literally went through that game yesterday when I was doing all my stat sheets on that one. But I think going back to Barry at the time, I remember we were talking about it. Obviously, Hannah Blundell was playing on the right-hand side at the time, Gabby George off the left. And we were kind of saying that Hannah off the right doesn't look the same player. Gabby had started the season well off the left. But again, what were you kind of thinking? Again, can you remember back to that time? And again, were you worried that, and looking back, that kind of just sums up our season, doesn't it? We have a good performance maybe against PSG in moments. We draw to Leicester. We get knocked out of the Champions League. We beat Everton 5-0 away. Guerrero gets an assist. Mallard scores. And then we draw away to Brighton. And to be fair, probably could have lost that if it wasn't for Williams right at the end, kind of saving us in that one. Do you think it does just that period? I think it's the first, 7 games, kind of just sum us up a little bit this year.
When you say that, but I often think it does when you're looking back. Obviously, at the time, you can sit there and frame things more emotionally. It depends on what you've seen and what you've watched. But the season's over now, and we've got to look at it as a whole, as what it is. And it really depends. Really depends on how you frame it. You just framed that obviously with the draws, but the first 9 games were 8 without defeat and only 1 loss, and that was to Paris Saint-Germain to go out of the Champions League. So if I said to you, "Oh yeah, my team's not lost yet this season, apart from going out of the Champions League to PSG," things can be put across in a different way, and I think that's the key thing with all those problems that you've just mentioned. The fact that we've had defenders go out, the fact that we've had, people like Grace Clinton were loaned out. We had Emma Watson with the ACL, all of those sorts of things that have happened. And I think it's really tricky because the world knows I'm not overjoyed by the whole season, but it is how you frame it. I think did you just want to look at just the first half of the league? Is that is there going to be another bit about it? Or
yeah, I'll come back to the league as a whole in a bit. It's purely just those first few, like the Leicester draw, the Brighton draw, and so on.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously we did draw too much. Had we not drawn as many games as we did, then we would have had a much better season. But that's, that's a bit like, if we didn't concede any goals, we'd have won lots of matches. So, it's a very basic level when it comes to analysing things like these. In answer to your question, I wasn't too worried at that point because I'd already said I didn't think we were going to win the league, and that was why I was not as convinced that the togetherness was there. People forget Martin Ho had gone. We didn't have a proper assistant manager. Charlotte Healy was stepping up, and that wasn't necessarily meant to be the plan from the start, I don't believe. It was in a bit of a mess. We got rid of 16 odd players, didn't we, that were just left, and so the whole demeanor. Like, you imagine that if you're working somewhere, I don't know, where's got a lot of people, McDonald's. Let's say you're working at McDonald's and you go wandering in, and then one shift, like half of the group has just gone, and you've just got like 12 other players that walked in. You don't know who they are. Obviously, as the season goes on, it becomes a bit more mental, doesn't it? You know, you've got one person who just sort of sits there and never has the opportunity to use anything. They're never asked to clean the tables. They're never making the burgers. They just sort of stood there, really. They're not even on their phone. You know, I'm sure there's going to be lots of McDonald's analogies as we go through this evening, but it would be weird, and you wouldn't feel as comfortable and as confident necessarily, because you're still feeling each other out and getting used to each other. So, no, I think at that point, as we're leading up to the first defeat of the season, apart from the European one against City, I think at that point, I wasn't particularly worried at that point, no, because I was still believing we could make the top three, even with the draws, because you knew that other teams would be stealing points off of each other as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of looking at it. I think I can't remember what I was thinking at the time, but I do remember thinking, like you just mentioned, obviously Martin left. We let a lot of players go. Vilda, obviously that saga and how that happened. You know, Dave just referenced there the Vilda and Irene saga. I mean, if Irene leaves this summer, we'll come back to that. But obviously that happened. Obviously Alessia and Honor were big ones over the summer. People forget, get your words out. People forget as well. You go back to the end of the transfer window, and there was a whole thing around Mary Earps as well, and linking to Arsenal, and there was a late bid for her, so there was unrest there. You had Jason Hinney coming in, who couldn't speak the language, so you had translators coming in and trying to think, is it Melvin Mallard, Fallon, and Gabby came in on deadline day. Melvin was actually late into the camp, so she came in late and was trying to integrate into the squad. So that's what I mean. You had all these players coming in, and all these, like I said, some that couldn't speak the language. You had different coaches, different things coming in. And we had so many games at a short pace as time. As I said, we were playing literally every 3 or 4 days. You know, when we didn't have that time. And I remember speaking to someone around the time that there just wasn't the time on the training ground to get the players there and start working with them. Because me and Jess were talking. So there was actually, do you remember back to, there was an international break right before the start of the season. So you had all these players coming in on deadline day and everything else. Then they all went away with internationals, and then they came right back to United. So none of these players could bed in. As I said, you had all this upheaval, went straight into the first game of the season, and we were playing 3 or 4 games. We were playing every 3 or 4 days. So there was not really that time. So I wasn't massively surprised looking back as to why we were so a bit all over the place and the team just didn't look fully together. It's after that where my patience wears a little bit as we get further on into the season. We'll talk about some of those.
I didn't talk about it. Actually told me not to, so I stopped at the right point. You've got to do the right thing now and shut up and move on to the next question. Otherwise, you're going to be cheating, and I could have done that bit.
Well, I'm kind of just looking at our results, and you look at obviously the Conti Cup in the early stages was actually a big shining light for us, really, because you look at we beat Everton 7-0. Let's focus on the Conti Cup. Let's get that out of the way, because I know that's obviously an interesting and controversial topic as we get towards a bit at the end. Obviously, we beat Everton 7-0. For me, just an unbelievable. That game seems like a bit of like a fever dream, to be honest. It was, for anyone that was there, it was chucking it down with rain. It was one of the worst nights. Absolutely freezing. But obviously, we won 7-0. We beat Liverpool away. Funnily enough, our only win over Liverpool this season was in the Conti Cup. We beat Leicester at home just before Christmas, obviously, and then the City game. Jess, you mentioned at the start you'd like to have seen us go a little bit further in the Conti Cup. Obviously, that was taken a bit out of our hands. You could argue that it was still in our hands, because if we'd have beaten City, we would have gone through as top of the group. However, what was happening over at Birmingham, or in Birmingham, I should say, at Aston Villa, was taken obviously away from us in that sense. So how would you, I guess, summarise our Conti Cup campaign? Because as I said, we won 3 out of the 4 group games. The 2-1 defeat to City as well. And to be fair, that was probably the best we played against City all season, I would argue, was in the Conti Cup. And that Conti Cup game did come 3 days after losing to Chelsea at Stamford Bridge as well. So there was also that. Do you think I'm not going to ask you, do you think it was successful? Because obviously it wasn't. We didn't get out of the groups. But do you think there's I don't know. I don't even know how I'm going to ask this, because I don't know what my opinion is myself in terms of how would you summarise, I guess, the Conti Cup? Because I say it's a tough one to talk about, isn't it? Because we got knocked out for something that really wasn't kind of within our control in some ways.
Yeah, I'm sort of torn over it because it was, before we even begin on the Conti Cup, it's a ridiculous competition. The structure of it makes no sense. Nobody likes it, to be honest. it's a bit dumb. It's annoying. And just in general, no one really likes it, let's face it. And I'm pretty sure we all say that before the competition even began. So I will just get that out there to begin with. But yeah, I'm sort of with you on that one, Connor, because I don't know how I feel about it, because we should have done better, but we didn't. It wasn't really our fault. Yes, there's an argument we should obviously beat City, but having said that, two teams go through. Us and City were probably the best. So out of us two, one of us was going to finish second, basically, in my opinion. So I think we were a little bit hard done by things that were completely out of our control there. And yeah, it's a bizarre competition, cup, tournament, whatever you want to call it. It's bizarre. And the fact that we came second and we still didn't go through, it all adds into how bizarre it is. And nothing ever surprises me with the Conti Cup, because it's just weird. So I think that's why I'm not really too bothered, because I just think it's a stupid competition. In general, people don't tend to be massive fans of like the League Cups in any kind of league. But I just think it's the structure. Every year I have to like reteach myself what the deal is with it, because it just baffles me. It just makes no sense whatsoever, to be honest. And I feel like I'm just going on a segue ranting about how I don't understand the Conti Cup. But the truth is, I don't. It confuses me, and I don't understand how we actually did all right. When you look back at our results, they are good. That is decent. Losing 2-1 to City away isn't particularly that bad. So it just, I can't really comment beyond that, to be honest, because I'll be completely honest, I don't remember performance-wise much about it. I remember the game away at City, because I did go to it, and it was okay. We didn't do great, but we, like you say, Connor, that was our best game against them. We obviously pulled off a good win against Everton and a good win against Liverpool, to be fair, because it was away and they battered us every other time. So, yeah, a weird one. I'm kind of torn about it in conclusion. Sorry, I can't really give you an answer because it's just stupid.
I was going to. Dave's asked the question: have we ever got out of the group stage? Obviously, we have a couple of times, but the one I remember in his first season, we went on a bit of a run in the Conti Cup. Obviously, got knocked out to Chelsea, beat Arsenal on the way, went down to Kingsmeadow, and obviously they beat us 3-1, I think, on that occasion. But it was 1-1 for a lot of that game. So we have had good Conti Cup runs in the past. Barry, I'll ask you the same question if you can summarise the Conti Cup, but also it's worth mentioning Fallon, because especially Jess mentioned the Liverpool game. That save she pulled off in the Liverpool game, the one that she kind of tips over the bar from. I don't know who it is. She shoves someone out of the way. I remember that to make the save. There's a Liverpool player kind of stood in her way. Get out of the way. One-handed save above the bar, and I think this was essentially Fallon's competition, wasn't it? It's the only time we saw her all season, and for me, she was exceptional there.
I mean, she was very good, very good. And this was the thing, actually. Last season, the Conti Cup was a blowout because we made too many changes and it didn't work well. And as a result of that, we were in a situation where we found ourselves out of the Conti Cup very early and with nothing really to show for it, and good players, people like Ella too, missing chances that she this season would have banged away without any problem whatsoever, it seems. So I think that was, a key thing. We did better than last year. Again, I find it difficult to be too upset with the Conti Cup performances. I mean, I'm angry that we lost to Liverpool. That's a theme that continues throughout the season, unfortunately. But I think besides that, we've done enough to go through. And I think this is where the drama for me comes in. We've gone out of a competition there, and it never should have been the case that we were the ones to go out of it. And I think that was the big thing. Like last year, we highlighted why away ends are really important in football, and that seems to be a thing now. This year, we've highlighted that the Conti Cup isn't really fit for purpose with the way they're doing it. But the problem that we have is that this is because we've followed a format to a degree where we've asked for a League Cup. So this is where the women's game has been given an FA Cup, the women's game has been given a League Cup. Now, I saw somebody earlier on, I don't know who, but I remember it being mentioned in the chat that the women need like a second European competition. And this is the danger of pushing too far, too early. And what I mean by that is you look at the Conti Cup, it's not of decent quality until the later stages. The fact that the people that won the league don't have to go in it in the group stage, or if they're in Europe, sorry, it is pathetic. The way that the groups are just ridiculous because it's nearly always the same. It's almost like a mini NFL. And the NFL is great in terms of entertainment, but it's absolutely crap in terms of the league. People are sitting there going, yeah, man, we finished in the top 4. Of course you finished in the top 4. There's only 4 in there, and it never changes, really. It's the same bleeding teams all the time. How can you get excited about that? It's a whole season where you're just playing lots of teams from other leagues, and that somehow affects the league that you're currently in. It makes no sense. It's honestly, it's worse than Scottish football in terms of that sort of thing. So I can't be doing with it. But yeah, the system's absolutely pony. Don't like it. Wish it needed to be changed. But again, I actually think the Conti Cup wasn't the worst thing. The fact that we were knocked out of it because of an administrative error from Villa that still allowed them to go in just shone a light on how absolutely ridiculous that was. So for me, absolutely pants. Don't like it. I'm not a fan. What I will say is Emily's just said they're at the Europa League for the women starting from the 25-26 season. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. And the last thing I want to say before you move on was about Michael. He put on here about the Bret Hart t-shirt, which is what it is. He's a great guy. But as I said, you guys here, we do like to sort it out. And I've got, look at that, the actual wraparound sunglasses. So there you go. This is me and my Bret Hart. It's not a costume. He signed these, by the way. Look, if you can read it there.
I was going to say, there is a signature on there, isn't there?
So I met him, you see, and this was the thing that I bought. So I don't really wear them, but for you and for AFU, I will, of course, don those for you. So there you go. That's a little first for you.
Signed it to your name as well, I saw there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, when I say I met him, like it wasn't like I just was signing stuff and I went and bought a signed one. I said, that my name's Barry. Can you write that on there, please? So it's good. I've got a picture with him as well. So yeah, there we go. As we're here, how's this turned into wrestling chat? But yeah, there you go.
On my life.
Greatest moment of my life. That was. He was my hero growing up in the wrestling. So that was when I found out he was there. He was at Derby. He was at Derby County, Pride Park. They were doing it, and I very nearly spent £300 that I didn't have to have dinner that next to him. Because they auctioned that, but somehow my sensible head went back on and like, you'll have literally no money for the rest of your life at that rate. So didn't quite go that far, but he was brilliant. Got photos on the phone. He was just a superb guy. Absolutely loved him. So, but there you go. Anyway, that's enough diversion from that.
Oh, can't beat a bit of old school WWE. I was watching actually a documentary about that time literally yesterday. That's a bit weird. I'm kind of with you. I'm glad the Conti Cup is there in some ways because we get to see players and combinations in the team that we maybe don't see. As I said with Fallon, if we didn't have the Conti Cup, we wouldn't have seen Fallon all season because she didn't play in the FA Cup and she was never going to play in the league. That's an interesting comment. I won't be reading that out.
I've just seen the one you were talking. I think he's misspelt it, bless him. Poor old. Oh, George.
Dear me. Anyway. Oh, God, this is going to get depressing now because obviously we're going to move on to the league a little bit. And there was two big defeats before we'll talk about the second half of the season in a second, but just before Christmas, we obviously had two big defeats. The one at Old Trafford, the 3-1 defeat to City, which to me was one of our worst showings of the season. I didn't think that could get eclipsed. Then we played Chelsea at Old Trafford. It very quickly got eclipsed. And obviously the 2-1 defeat to Liverpool at home. Literally the game right before Christmas. Obviously, Jess, you were at that City. I think you were at both. I can't remember whether you were at the second one, but you were definitely at the City one, especially for us because that was such a weird week, wasn't it? Because we'd had such a good week. We'd been to the Content Awards. We'd got bronze in that. It was such a good week. And then that happened on the Sunday. And it just, yeah. Do you think that was maybe... Again, I keep saying does this kind of sum up the season, but obviously we'd lost a lot of the big games 3-1 this season, pretty much all of them. Bar obviously Chelsea last season, we've lost 3-1 this season. Was that kind of, I guess, a sign of things to come in these games? Because we said 1 point against the top 4 all season is all we managed, where I think it was 15 the season prior. This was kind of our first big test, City at home. Obviously, I know we played Arsenal at home, but it was at Old Trafford, big crowd. I think it was the record at the time for Old Trafford as well. What were you kind of thinking around that time? Those 2 games in particular, because obviously we'd already drew to Arsenal, and then we go and lose 2 home games against our rivals at the time in City and Liverpool.
Yeah, it was just brutal, to be honest, absolutely brutal. Like you said, we had a very hectic kind of week leading up to it. And it had been so good. I think, like Connor, we'd been on Paddock talking about it. We'd had the awards night. I'd had such a busy week from the Wednesday to the Sunday, all this stuff going on. And I was exhausted, but I dragged myself to that game and I'm like, come on, let's go. And I think the biggest issue was that 3-1 probably actually makes us look like we were in it at one point, maybe. And in all honesty, it was the same with the Arsenal game, and it was probably the same with City away. 3-1, we've scored, so it looks like we kind of done better. But realistically, Arsenal City could have actually put more past us. I think that was the biggest issue. It was the performance. It's not like we played well in parts or we played well and we just got unlucky. For me, from those games, we kind of were fortunate that we even managed to score, to be honest, because I don't think we necessarily deserved to even get a goal in any of those games. And I think looking back, it makes us look marginally better. I mean, I remember that Arsenal away. Oh my God. I got up at like 5 a.m. to go down to watch, and everyone knows my thoughts on London.
Love it.
No, anything south of like Crewe, I'm like, no.
Crewe.
I'm like, no. No, basically, no. Anyway, I got up at literally before the crack of dawn. I was at Connor's by the crack of dawn, for God's sake. And yeah, just that performance, my God. I just wished I'd stay in bed. I think I got home at like 9 o'clock, 9:30, and I was just depressed. So depressed. Anyway, again, yeah, that Arsenal game, I think us scoring, when you look back now, you think, 3-1, obviously not great, but it looks like we at least got a goal. But my memory of those games is we just got battered. We played crap and we got battered, basically. And you make me relive it, and now I'm stressed and depressed again, to be honest. So thanks for that. I'm so glad I came on.
I was going to say, Barry, if I bring it back to you then, obviously, and bring it back to the Liverpool game, because you think back, the Liverpool and City games that I mentioned, Old Trafford and LSV, we were leading in both of those games. We'd scored early in both. It was a Zelen penalty at Old Trafford, and I can't remember who it was. It Tooney, I think, against Liverpool early on, but it was definitely early. It was within the first kind of couple of minutes. So again, both games we were 1-0 up, and went on obviously to lose 2-1 against Liverpool and 3-1 against City. And I think that was, someone just put it in the chat in terms of that's when the fans, Michael said that LSV loss to Liverpool was when that's what made me turn on Skinner. And I think that's when, I think a lot of the mood on this channel, I think, changed, was that defeat right before Christmas, when it was like, oh, okay, hang on. Like, the league was gone a while ago, but now top 3 is threatened. Obviously, we still had the game against Arsenal, as Jess mentioned. I think that was the real killer for top 3 when we lost at the Emirates. But yeah, do you remember that time? Obviously, the game at Old Trafford, because that was really disappointing to me. You just sold out. It was the record, as I said. We were 1-0 up, and obviously we lose there pretty poorly in the end. And then the game at LSV against Liverpool at home, which obviously Liverpool did end up doing the double over us, which is not a nice thing to be saying. But yeah, did that again? Like I said, I keep going back to it. 1 point against the top 4. I mean, that to me is just shocking.
We've spoken about progression all the way through our time on this channel. That's what you want to see as a young, burgeoning team like that. That's what we want to be seeing. We're emerging from the shadows to a degree of City's women's team, and that's the whole purpose of what we are trying to achieve. The league, I can't put a positive spin on it. I can't. I've put a positive spin on the Champions League. I put a positive spin on the cup that shall not be named. But it's very difficult to put a positive spin on the second half of the season. The first half, like I say, when you look at the stats, it's really not too bad. But when you start adding in how that went, 4 wins, defeat to Liverpool, 3 wins, defeat to Liverpool, FA Cup win, lose to Chelsea and City, one after the other. And obviously the City one being the one where we end up out in the Conti Cup. 3 wins, lose to Arsenal. 3 without loss, lose to City. And the problem this year in the league was, number one, that Liverpool just turned into, I don't know, it was like watching Transformers. Just all of a sudden they've turned into a team that was up for the fight, whereas last season they looked like they were, on their way back down to the Championship. And secondly, the fact that we couldn't get anywhere with the teams that ended up finishing in the top 4. When you look at those stats that say that we got 1 point out of teams in the top 5 in those matches, that's where we've lost the league. That's where we've lost the chance to finish in the top 5. If you want to finish in the top 5, you've got to be getting something. Those are the games where if you're going to nick a draw, those are the ones to go and do it in. They're the ones that you want to be drawing. With all respect, if you are wanting to finish in the top 3, top 4, top 5, you need to be defeating all those other teams, the remaining 7. And yeah, you need to nick points against the likes of the Arsenals, the likes of the Liverpools that are just above you in that respect. I think after last season, that was the big problem, was that we walked away from all of those games that were played this season in the league, and we just didn't feel that it was good. Now, there were a lot of reasons for that. We've spoken about the coaching changes. I wasn't happy. The coaching changes were atrocious. It was horrific what we watched this season in a lot of those games. And, you can't bypass that. We've said it before, Connor, it's been really difficult doing these shows this year. Really difficult. Like, this is becoming a really successful channel with lots of people coming in and giving their opinions and what they've got to think and what they're saying. And we sit here on our hands sometimes and biting our lip and thinking about all manner of things because, we try and walk a line. I know there's people that might say, they want to ingratiate themselves with the club. We don't. It's not about that. It's a fan channel at the moment, and that's what it's all about. But what we do want to do is to be fair and to be respectful, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily always about our opinions. But it was just so bad. So bad. And to be in a situation like there was nobody more vociferous. Well, maybe John Foster was more vociferous, but there was only one more vociferous than me in support of Mark Skinner last season, and I gave him absolutely everything that I possibly could in terms of that support. And fair play, he paid us back with an FA Cup final and a really good finish in the second. And you're right, Mayo. No, we didn't beat others as well, but the top 5, they were the big ones. You've got to be taking points off of them. Liverpool managed it, we didn't, and that's why we didn't finish in the top 4. Like, if we'd have finished 4th this season, then you sit there and go, all right, it's not the world's worst season. Finishing 5th, letting Liverpool, a team, like I say, that were relegation for the last season, that's not good enough. You can't put a gloss on that. So I'm really annoyed about the league season, and I'm really annoyed that you're making me talk about it, if I'm honest with you, because I've just had 10 days of nothing to worry about it. It's all been lovely, and now I feel like I'm going through it all over again. But yeah, it was atrocious, and for us it was really difficult because Mark Skinner has not ended this season well for me at all. I am not happy with that man because of the way in which he is talking, the things that he's saying. He's on very, very, very thin ice with me. But ice that I will grant you has grown a little bit thicker due to the fact that I have to accept the fact he's going to be here for at least another year. So therefore, he will get my support, as all Manchester United managers will. But that ice will crack and go very, very quickly if he doesn't put himself together. He says he wants to work for the fans, and he says he wants to do all this positive stuff, and he wants to help us to get on and do better and win stuff. Well, just bloody well do it. Yeah, stop talking about it. And if you can't, step aside and let somebody else do it.
well, this is going to be a topic of conversation for sure as we get over the summer in terms of looking ahead to next season in terms of what we're talking about. Yeah, we have to relive that. This is kind of our last show, I guess, looking at the season, in terms of as a whole. We might do further shows talking about individual players potentially and things like that. But as a season as a whole, this will be the last time we relive any of these 3-1s until next season when we potentially have to look back at some of these again. There's kind of markers as to improvement or regression and things like that. I want to kind of, I don't know whether to keep talking about the league or not. I don't really want to. I want to kind of focus on the FA Cup, to be honest, because that's when things did take an upturn. Obviously, the other side of Christmas, we did play, or the New Year, I should say. Obviously, we had the game against Newcastle, won pretty comfortably, as we kind of expected. For those of you who don't remember the FA Cup run, obviously, we beat Southampton away in February, 3-1. That was a shaky game, I can't lie. When Southampton got back into the game, in that one, obviously, levelled it up. Obviously, then we went on to beat Brighton 4-0. Probably one of our best performances of the season. Then we beat Chelsea, obviously, in the semi-final, and obviously Spurs in the final. How can anyone forget that one as well? You will have done. You will see me just staring almost down the barrel of the camera, trying not to cry. Because that hurt on that one. So yes, I am in it. The camera's not on me, but I'm right behind the person it is. So yeah, you can quite visibly see me. Not very happy. Quite a few times in that one. Anyway, Jess, why do you think our FA Cup run was so much different to the league? Because I mentioned those games at bar Southampton, I think, because that was a little bit shaky. But we looked so good in the FA Cup this season. Obviously, the win against Chelsea, first time we've ever done that. Obviously beat Brighton 4-0 away. That was a huge win. Big win, obviously, of Newcastle. And then the final, well, I mean, we made easy work of that in the end. We'd won it by 55, 60 minutes, in the final. Why do you think that was? Do you think it was just the case of, at the time, the league had maybe gone a little bit and the mentality shift was just onto the FA Cup by that point? What do you think it was potentially that our cup form was just so much better?
All I can think is that it was basically like a psychological thing. With the FA Cup, obviously, in the kind of earlier stages, you're up against kind of easier teams. Obviously, Newcastle are fantastic. They're progressing really, really well. They're absolutely flying through the leagues. But let's face it, United should be comfortably beating them, which we did. I think some of it might just be it's just completely separate to league. Form doesn't really matter. We've seen traditionally in the men's game, like tiny teams can go on like quite far and end up against, league winners and stuff like that. So I do think some of it is the whole, magic of the cup, kind of the psychological side of it, that you can almost build momentum quite easy. I think that was potentially played a part. I think the fact, like we've already mentioned, the league potentially went fairly early for us. I mentioned it in one of my first little sections here, that early on in the league, everyone was screaming at each other all the time. The players were just at each other all the time. And from that side of things, it looked really negative. It looked like a really negative place to be. I imagine that their heads were probably down quite a bit. Whereas then you go into the FA Cup games, at that point, we were playing teams like Newcastle. Like I said, we should be beating them. I think it's just easier maybe to pick up morale. And then I don't know whether we were just a bit fortunate. I say we were fortunate with the run. We faced Chelsea in the semis. But maybe up until that point, we were a little bit fortunate with the teams we met. And I think it was maybe just the momentum. We played the teams we played were the right team for the right time. I think the win against Chelsea was obviously absolutely fantastic. And I think for that game, it was probably a case of, well, at that point, the league was long gone. I think top 3 was probably gone at that point. At that stage, it was a case of, we get to the final of the FA Cup, or this season's like a complete write-off, basically. And everyone had been saying, obviously, for ages that we had to beat Chelsea at some point, so why not beat them in the semi-final? And yeah, I do, like I say, I think some of it is just that anything can happen in a cup. But yeah, it was good to see. And for me, I think the main reason was probably that momentum carried us, and we just had our heads in the right place. I think a lot of it was psychological.
Yeah, Barry, do you tend to agree with that? Because obviously, me and you were at that Brighton game. I remember walking out of there, and we were both just saying, it was just for us the best game we'd seen live at the time. Obviously, that then got eclipsed by me in the Chelsea semi-final. So yeah, what was your content? Obviously, I know you're happy with the FA Cup win. Obviously, our run this season, because I think someone's put it in the chat. The season prior, it was almost like our mindset switched to the league. I know we got to the cup final, but it seemed to be most of the focus was on the league. Whereas this season, it was almost like the reverse. We knew the kind of top three was kind of gone by March. I think we were 7 or 9 points away by the end of March. At that point. Do you think it was as simple as that? Like that it was just a mindset switch? Because we did win league games in and around then. We did pick up wins in the league.
That's the mindset of fans, 100%. And we're allowed to do that because we're fans. We've got absolutely nothing to do with what's going on the pitch. We can buoy them and help them in that respect, or we can be quiet and not give them any extra energy. But what goes on the pitch, by and large, isn't really an effect of what we think or believe. And I say that because we might think it's gone. It's unforgivable if you are a football player not giving your all for a football club at any point in your career. Even if you are thinking, we can't make it in the top three, it's unacceptable for you to be going out and playing football and thinking otherwise. So I don't believe for 1 minute that that's where their mind was. But there is truth in the fact that cup games are very different to league games. It's just a one-off game. Mentally, it is different because where it is different is you're thinking, well, all right, the league games, we're not necessarily having great fun in the league. The pressure's on there because we've finished high before. We've never won the FA Cup before. So there was, I'm sure, some unfinished business that was in the players' minds. And if I'm brutally honest, I think one of the things that also helped us is, and I think I'm right with this, I can't remember about the Southampton one, but we scored first in every game, didn't we? And yeah. I think that was a big thing. When we get ahead, we're a lot more confident. That was what I was finding this season. If we could get a goal, we seemed to be quite confident. If we didn't get a goal, it was really, really tricky to go on and get the win. And I think for us in that game, that's a big thing. The fact that we'd scored first, we got ourselves reasonably comfortable. I know that I think Southampton equalised on that one, and then we went on to win. So that one was the blip. But with the others, we got ourselves ahead, and we gave ourselves that confidence to play. If we'd have carried on playing, getting past half time, we still haven't scored a goal, you start getting a bit more panicky, and then you start thinking about all the negativity that's happening in previous games. We didn't have that really this season. For the most part, we played incredibly well. So, yeah, I think that the FA Cup was absolutely brilliant. And there's no higher accolade you can give it, really. The FA Cup was massive. It was huge. And genuinely, I think it saved the season. We don't win that FA Cup. And let's be clear, you said it, we absolutely steamrolled Tottenham. At times, you did have to wonder if they were even there, because it just didn't seem to have, I felt sorry for the Spurs fans that had turned up, because they didn't really see their team do much. I think they saw Martha Thomas get a bit angry at the ref, and then get a bit angry at someone because it had gone off. And that was it. I don't recall a moment where I was really panicking about Spurs coming forward. So I think where the FA Cup also helps us is that win against Chelsea. I know that obviously the last game of the season didn't end up being very good at all, but we know we can beat them now. It's in there. In our mind, we're never sitting there and going, we can't beat Chelsea. It's not possible. We now know that we can do that. And so I think the FA Cup has given us a lot more. And that's the thing that has made it, for me, reasonably successful this season.
That's going to be the last question I ask you. Just a little spoiler on that one. Yeah, I agree. Obviously, the FA Cup, it was all we had to play for at the time, obviously, because it was so disappointing before that. I remember going into that Brighton game. We'd come off the back of the 3-1 defeat to Arsenal, as just mentioned earlier. We then went back down to London a few weeks later and drew to West Ham, and that was, again, another poor draw that we maybe didn't have the season prior. So I was going into that semi-final, I think, the quarter-final, against Brighton, just going, oh, no. Like, what if we lose today? Like, that's our season over. Like, that was our season in a game. Same with the semi-final, really. obviously the final, but the final I never really felt. Obviously, I wasn't everyone who saw me pre-game. I was nervous as anything before the game, but like during it, it was like, oh, this is pretty easy in the end. Like especially that second half, it was like, what, is this a final? Like, or like what's going on? It felt obviously it was nice, and it was by far the best day I've had following this team. Obviously, shame it got a little bit overshadowed, as we'll kind of discuss in just a second. But I don't really know which question to kind of. Because I want to come back to that. I'm gonna end the quick because it's in the title and it was on the thumbnail as well in terms of can it be classed as a success and things like that. Is there anyone just as a couple of quick fire ones to kind of I guess slow us down a little bit? On quick fire ones that's going to slow us down. That sentence doesn't really work, does it? That's not a sentence I thought I'd be saying. Is there
Unless you're actually shooting us? If you're actually shooting us quick fire, that will slow us down like considerably.
Definitely not. Is there a player that you could, if I just say the words most improved, is there a player that springs to mind for you for this season? I asked the question and I don't have no, I do have an answer actually. I think for me, it's a tough one because I think a lot of our players underperformed this season. But is there anyone you look at and think they've improved on the previous season?
I've got two, but I'll let Jess go first.
I have one that I'm sort of thinking of, and to be fair, I think this player played very well last season because I spent most of last season wanting to see more of them, but it's Garcia. I think last season she spent a lot of time coming off the bench. Now, when she did come off the bench, she played really, really well. So it's not so much a case of I think that she's improved massively from last season because I just don't think we saw all that much of her. But that being said, I think this season she really has stepped up to kind of become a starter and has played really, really well and has kind of been one of the bright spots this season. And to be honest, one of my favourite things about her is even when she hasn't necessarily been playing amazing, when the whole team have been playing pretty crap, to be honest, she's the one player who will not stop trying. She does not stop running all game. No matter what situation we're in, she will just go and go and go. So she's probably the one for me.
I think the two that I went for, Nikita Paris would be my first one. I think she did really well last season, but my goodness, this season I think she really came into her own, and I think the fact even that we finished fifth and that we made it to a lot of these parts of the competition, doing reasonably well in the Conti Cup and the FA Cup. I think it was down to her goals, especially against Everton. So that would be my first one. I think she was superb. The second one, though, for me, would be Millie Turner. I think really well improved because, and not that she was poor last season. Obviously, she was part of a defence that was absolutely almost impenetrable at times. But she's made it into the Lionesses this year as well. And I just think she's been a lot more consistent. I can remember last season, the games against Chelsea, to be fair, Millie was at fault for at least one or two of the goals. And I just don't think she was as confident. I think this season her confidence did grow a bit more. So I would probably go with either Nikita Paris or Millie Turner.
It's weird. I don't even think about Keats. Obviously, it's a top scorer. But thinking that's definitely, I would have said Paris. I think Jade was the other one that I had in my head. I know we didn't see next to any of her the season prior, but I think a player that's kind of having their first real big professional season in how she was. I think she stepped up when she obviously was able to play. I know she's kind of had injuries herself, but I think Garcia and Turner are great shots. Well, there's a reason that Garcia and Turner were our kind of top two in our player of the seasons when we got obviously to those two. I also think Lisa Nelson's a good shout as well, actually. A player, again, that maybe didn't get as much game time last season. But when she's played this, I think she's been hit and miss. I think she's had some very, very good games, but I think there's been games which have been quite poor as well on that one. This isn't really a quick fire one, but it's been referenced a lot in the chat while we're talking about Garcia. Obviously, that move to Mexico is pretty imminent, I would say, from her side. Does it put a bit more of a dampener on the season because we're getting to crunch time now, we've got, 5 players out of contract? 6? Earps, Zell, obviously Melvin's loan ending, Lucia Garcia, Nikita Paris, Rachel Williams, 6 players out of contract. Jess, I'll start with yourself. Does it put a bit more of a dampener on the season if all 6 of those were to walk out the door on a free as well? Because we're getting to the point now on the 6th of June, for those of you watching this back on replay, and we've not had any renewals that we're aware of. Publicly tweeted by United. All we keep seeing at the moment is players rumoured to be leaving rather than any potentially that are potentially staying. Does that worry you a little bit and put a bit of a dampener on the season? Because again, we had this last season where a relatively successful season, got second, pushed Chelsea all the way, got to the cup final. We lost Russo and Honor and a lot of players over the summer. Some would argue that was coming anyway. We've just won an FA Cup and we're potentially losing our starting goalkeeper, our captain, our top scorer, our second top scorer, our third top scorer, our fifth top scorer, all for free in the same summer.
Yeah, and for me, I don't care what people in the comments say, what people's opinions are of players. If you let that many key players go, that is going to cause an issue in the squad. I don't care what people's opinions are of them individually or as footballers. You lose that amount of key players, and that is a problem. I mean, if we look back to last season, we potentially lost the same amount of players, and they were people that us as fans wouldn't necessarily consider key players. So not necessarily top scorers, captain, starting goalkeeper. And it was a problem. So if we do that again, but potentially, like you say, the top 3 scorers, keeper, captain, and not only that, but like fan favourites, dressing room favourites, that is a big change. And I think it's very easy for people to sit there and go, oh, well, I don't like so-and-so. They're not good enough for United. They need to go. Fine, but you need to think beyond that a little bit. It's not that simple, unfortunately. And I'm sorry, but your captain is a key player. Your goalkeeper, who is potentially one of the best in the world, is a key player. Your top scorer is a key player. Your second top scorer is a key player. Who are you going to replace them with? We've already proven this season that we cannot bring people in and integrate them straight away. We are incapable. What are we going to do? Seriously, like, we're just basically going to repeat the same as last season. So yeah, it's going to be an issue. And why would people want to join United right now? Like, seriously, what do we have to offer? We clearly are not treating the players particularly well. It doesn't seem like we've got a great infrastructure behind the scenes. So what are we going to do? How are we going to replace these players and get them integrated? Because we can't do it. We've proven we can't do it. And you can't have that high of a turnover and not expect it to cause issues. Again, I don't care what your particular problems are with individual players. It's not that easy. This isn't FIFA. You can't just buy someone because they're better, put them in the team and just play because it's going to be fine. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. I would love it if it was that simple. If you could just get rid of a player because they're underperforming and bring someone in as a like-for-like replacement or a better than like for replacement, and then just slot in with the training, with the lifestyle. You know, some people just don't even like living in Manchester. God knows why. Weird to me. But, you know, even stupid stuff like that is a problem. But this is the kind of thing that needs to have been sorted a long time ago. We can't be into June now and not have more things set up. Because again, it's how this looks to everyone else. And again, why would players want to come and join us? You know, we can talk about all these great players that we want to get in, but how are we going to appeal to them if it's so obvious that we're treating our current squad like crap? Why would we then treat new players any better? So, yeah, sorry, I just had a bit of a rant then, but I just felt like it needed to be said, to be honest. So, yeah, Barry, over to you.
Yeah, just very quickly, Barry, before you, there's a few comments, just very quickly. Ema's saying Jess for Prime Minister. You probably could run Jess, but I don't think you'd like it because obviously you'd have to go down to Westminster a lot, and I don't think you'd deal with London.
No, they would have to move I think that they should move up north anyway. So I will be Prime Minister, but only from like Manchester.
That's
Mayor of
literally
Manchester. There was a comment a bit further on, Michael. I know what you're saying, and to be fair, it's perfectly valid saying it's pointless speculating many of these players on holiday. Most transfer is not based on natural knowledge. I will just say it is, and you can believe me if you want or not. Even if you don't want to believe me, just look at the players out of contract. We're now on the 6th of June. We've not had a single announcement. We're the only club in the WSL that has not made a single announcement. Probably one of the only clubs in the top 5 European leagues that have not made an announcement. I'll have to fact check that. But every other club have made their leavers pretty known, apart from us. And I think that is indicating in one direction that a lot of those players out of contract are leaving. Because otherwise we'd have heard something about it. There would have been a rumour that someone's close to signing. There would have been something. I think the fact that everyone's so laid back about it, to me, it's showing in one direction. Particularly the likes of Lucia. I think it's pretty obvious that she's on the way out. I know what you're saying, TJ. This is what you do every year. How many of those players stayed last year? Pretty much all of them went. Everyone that was out of contract last summer, pretty much, I think 90% of them left. I think only Aoife Mannion was the only one that we kept. Someone might have to fact check that for me. I'm pretty sure it was only Aoife that stayed, and that was a year or a trigger anyway. So yeah, we'll come back to that. Barry, does it worry you? Again, like I said, we're talking about a successful season, a trophy. I'll call it a trophy-winning season for now. Something that we've not had since the championship. And as I said, I didn't realize how potentially bad it was, because I said, whatever you think of these as players, I said it's our top scorer, our second top scorer, our fourth and fifth, one of those being loan, and your captain and your starting keeper, albeit some would argue Fallon is an adequate replacement to come in there. But does that worry you a little bit off the back of, like I said, a trophy-winning season? We're now on the 6th of June, and again, does that take a bit of the same way the 6-0 did? Does that take a bit of a shine off the season a little bit for you, that we're still talking about this? Potentially that nearly all of them could be walking out the door.
No, it doesn't take shine off the season, because the season wasn't that shiny in the first place. It was reasonably shiny, but it's a different thing. The season's over now. This is post-season, or as I like to call it, silly season. So, there's so much to unpack here. I think the thing that worries me, and again, I'll probably get shouted at by someone, but what worries me is the fans. And what worry always when it comes to transfer season just makes me want to cry, because there's just so much inaccuracy and so much venom sometimes that just comes in that's just not necessary. And the thing that we do need to recognize is we do not know what is happening behind those doors. We have not got a Scooby. There are people that will be sitting here having all manner of conversations about, this is what's happening. But let's look at already in the comments who's been blamed. Mark Skinner's been blamed. Ineos have been blamed. Jim Ratcliffe's been blamed. Who's not being blamed? The players. Nobody's sitting there and saying anything about them. But actually, the truth is that everybody in this scenario shares responsibility, and fans even, to a degree. How so? Well, let me explain. When we look at purchasing players, transfers, and extending contracts, when we do that, what we need to recognise is that we don't really know the hierarchy of how that works. Who is it who decides who gets a new contract? Is it going to be Skinner? Are there people above him that are dealing with that? We've had some, absolutely, TJ, Polly Bancroft, absolute waste of space. I remember sitting on here being so excited, so excited. And I've answered that, Anton, because the fans will just blame one person. Sorry, I didn't finish that run. I'll go on with it. The fans will just blame one person. They never sit there and look at the whole picture. Manchester United is an absolute bloody mess. And people are sitting here just wanting to have a go at Eric Ten Hag, or just wanting to have a go at Mark Skinner. And excuse me. And it's bigger than that. It's bigger than Ten Hag, and it's bigger than Mark Skinner. We have been in a situation now where this club is just at the depths. Look at how the two clubs have mirrored each other. The men didn't do particularly well. They've had their worst league finish, and we've had our worst league finish. The men win the cup, and we've won the cup. And we don't really want to talk about Europe or the League Cup for either of them, because although it's been a while since we've been in it and done well, it didn't end up good. Newcastle being our Liverpool in the men's situation. So I just think people just need to take a wider view of what's going on and stop with the blame. Like Jess was saying about the people, and how they feel about players. Jess is spot on with what she said. Absolutely spot on with what she said about how we're advertising our club. The fact that we don't have the decency to announce to our fans what's going on, and everybody else does. Like Arsenal had no problems with it. It's the end of the season. That's it. They're not going to be with us. Just let them know that they're gone, and that's it. And the bit that frustrates me about all of this, Connor, is how annoying it is that the whole hierarchy, and I'm talking Man United, the whole lot, Ineos, Sir Jim, Mark Skinner, Polly Bancroft, Kate the Tea Lady, absolutely everybody, they all need to take absolute responsibility for this. Because what annoys us as fans is that we love this club. And because we love this club, it hurts us when proper things don't happen. You look at Frank Kirby leaving Chelsea and how big that was. All I will say to you, Connor, is that if any of those players, such as Mary Earps, Katie Zellum, Nikita Paris, if any of them are thinking of leaving the club and are going to, and somehow that's not been announced, they have robbed us as fans the opportunity to say goodbye to the best goalkeeper in the world, to the captain who has been with us since day one, a Manchester United fan born and bred, who has given absolutely everything that she's got, and Nikita Paris, who has shown that people are wrong. Yes, Garcia might go, and you know what? Money talks. You can't blame them. They're going to get paid more money than they get paid in the WSL. Why would they not go? It's a short career as a footballer. And Guerrero, I mean, to be fair, her backside must have more splinters in than, I don't know, than a bit of wood, right? The whole point of it is that everybody's just going to go mad because it's transfer season, and I hate it. It's the world's worst thing, and yet you still ask me the question about it. So am I worried that they're going to go? Yeah, of course I am. They haven't signed a contract. But the fact the club never announces anything, it really winds me up. And this is where, for me, the anger should be. It shouldn't be at Mark Skinner, because people are saying, oh, well, who's going to sign for Mark Skinner? Well, Laetitia did. She extended her contract. So we can't just sit here and go, well, Mark Skinner's an absolute idiot and therefore no one's ever going to sign, because one of the best young up-and-coming defenders in the world has signed. So it can't be terrible. You've got to put a bit of it on the players as well. There's a reason why they don't want to stay. It might well be they don't like Mark Skinner. It might be they've just had enough of watching this channel and hearing some people have a go all the time. It could be that, I don't know, they just think there's better clubs out there and that it's a short career. I don't know. But I think for me, it's just we've got to stick it out there and realise that it is actually all about the club. Be angry at the club. Stop trying to make it personal. People sitting there going, oh, well, we don't care if Katie Zellum stays. Oh, Mary Earps can go. Even I'm not sitting there and saying that. And I wanted her gone and her head on a platter in the first 6 weeks because of the way that she was with Arsenal. But football doesn't work that way. So we've just got to sort of temper it, I suppose. And that is why I think that that's what upsets me most, because I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but I can see what every single fan writes. And if you're telling me that you don't sit there on Twitter during transfer season going through there and just going, oh, for God's sake, if you haven't got cracks off of your phone through watching Twitter, then you're a better man than I am, because my God, like the amount of argument, you don't see it. I'm sitting there today writing these things out, and I'll just go delete, because I'd be deleted genuinely if I came out with all the stuff I thought about some of these opinions that I hear. So, we've all just got to take a chill pill. It'll be what it'll be. But I don't like the way the club keeps us in the dark, and I think that they need to sort their life out big time.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I tweeted this the other day. I mean, to be honest, I'm expecting pretty much all of those out of contracts to not be here next season, bar maybe Rach. I think we might see Rach again next season. But to be honest, the rest of them, I think they will be going. And I think you're right in pointing out that the fact that I fully believe that the club will have known at least on a couple of them before the end of the season. Like you said, Arsenal, Viviana Miedema is one of Arsenal's biggest players. They announce it before the end of the season that she's going. Frank Kirby, as you mentioned, and Mara Mialda, obviously at Chelsea. They announce these players so they can have a bit of a send-off at their last home game. Obviously, albeit our last home game didn't go the way that we potentially wanted with a 6-0 defeat, so it wouldn't have been amazing, but we'd have had something. And I think someone put it in the chat earlier, like Zellum's last potential thing for her at United was parading that FA Cup around after just being battered 6-0 at home, and none of the other players wanted to take it off her because, as we said on the show at the time, she tried to give it to another player, like a few of the other players, quite a few times, and no one would have it. And that to me just makes me sad, the fact that that's potentially the last moment. And if there would have been a send-off, like let's just use Elemenopes as an example, because they've been here obviously the longest out of the ones that we're talking about here. If those two are to leave, you think of the different reception it would have been at Old Trafford. Yes, we lose 6-0 potentially, whatever. It still would have been poor at full time, but I think it would have been a bit better knowing you're watching those players for the last time. You can give them a bit more of a send off as they walk out. That's to me what I'm most annoyed at, because I said, yeah, I think if they were staying, I don't know this as fact, but I think if they were staying, we'd have heard by now. And there would have been rumours. There would have been, there's a lot of good journalists in this country that would have picked up on this and reported on it by now. Every other club have had it, bar us. And I think that is a big indication of where we're at in terms of those players' contracts.
That is the big thing. And also from what was just said there, May Letizia is probably signed because, she likes Skinner for the amount of minutes she gets. Well, nobody could like Skinner more for the amount of minutes they get than Katie Zellum. But as you all delight in telling me, why does she never get dropped? So the amount of minutes she played doesn't necessarily go to it. Maybe they think the club doesn't have an ambition. Maybe, the people behind the scenes don't want these players. The only way this is going to resolve itself will be when we get to the start of the season and we'll look at our squad and go, did we recruit well? And if we recruit well and we're looking at that team, people like Grace returning, people like Emma Watson being there, and we see a refresh side, brilliant. But that's going to be the big thing. It's always going to be doom and gloom when people leave, and there's always going to be problems, and it's never the people that you necessarily want to go. But I recall us not being too fussed about the 16 last season because they were players that we weren't generally going to use. So, you've got to trust them because there's no other choice. So these are the people that are running our club. We've got to give them the opportunity to do it. They've got to then go out there. And they do need to get like a Liz Turland. If they can get someone like her, that'd be absolutely superb because, she'd be superb up front and that would replace Nikita Paris quite well. Do you know what I mean? If you're going to replace these players, go out there, get Bon Matty, and then nobody's going to care about Katie Zellum. And if we've got PTJ who's going to take over from Mary Earps, then you feel all right about it. If Garcia's going to go, but Jays is stepping up and doing well, spot on. That's what it's going to be about. But of course, it's going to be, it's just the place is going to be awash with angry people. And if it makes you feel any better, you can just sit there and imagine, I wonder what Barry's doing right now. And the answer is throwing my phone against the wall.
I think that's it. It's definitely going to be short. I hope, and I do fully believe that we will spend well this window. And I think Elizabeth Turland is definitely a player that I would be looking at. It's already been reported. Obviously, the interest is there. However, we're not the only club that is speaking to her, and she's going to have a lot of offers this summer. But I think that's it. I think when we come to do this show in September, when we're coming up to the start of the season, we may look at the squad and go, actually, it's better than last season. We don't know. We don't know who we're going to buy. We don't know what the window is going to entail. At the moment, I'm just a bit worried about it. Just because of that, it just annoys me that we didn't give them a send-off if they are to leave. That's the big irk for me. And hopefully we start getting some announcements pretty soon. The first announcement last year, I think, was on around the 14th of June, so we've probably got a couple of weeks potentially to wait until we get the first official one. But we'll see. You never know. They might drop it tomorrow. They might go, by the way, these players are leaving, and just drop it on a random Friday afternoon. I honestly could not tell you right now. Right, my last kind of two questions then. The last one's literally a rate out of 10, so I'll come back to that last. But it's in the title. It's on the thumbnail. Jess, can this season be classed as a success for you? When you're looking at 2023-24 as a season, would you say, yes, that's a successful season? I appreciate this is quite a tough question because I haven't fallen on either side of the fence yet on this one. Would you look back at it and say it's been a success?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't think I will ever look back at the season. And no, my answer's going to be no, because I don't think I will ever look back at the season and think that basically I had a nice time or that I enjoyed myself going to games. So no, I don't think this season will be a successful one. That being said, I will always look back, obviously, at the FA Cup final as one of the best days of my life because I had such a good time. I was with my friends, and I just had a really nice time. I watched football. I saw my team lift a trophy with some of my best friends. So
Where was that?
in London.
What city?
In London.
Greatest city in the world. Exactly that. Well done.
Briefly make London slightly better for me. That's twice now I've been to Wembley actually and had one of the best days of my life. So really, London should rate higher. It's just the rest of it is a dump and I hate it. Apologies to all the Southerners. I've lost my train of thought now. It's been a long day. I'm very confused. So in conclusion, no, not a success, but I am happy about the FA Cup.
Barry, same question to you. I think Jennifer summed up pretty well. One season of disappointment, one day of brilliance.
That is a very good summary.
That's potentially a good way of looking at it. Because again, like I said, I wouldn't swap that day for anything. However, sat here on the 6th of June, as I knew we would be as soon as we lost 6 on the last day of the season, I'm looking at the whole season going, well, I don't know.
I mean, it's a very good soundbite, and I agree with you all. Jennifer's made a very good point there, but technically it would be 2, wouldn't it? Because the game against Chelsea was absolutely unreal, and then you make it 3 because the game against Brighton, we said at that time, was the best we'd seen us play that season. So there's at least 3 days that you can go for there. Let's be clear. I think for me, we're going to sit there, and when we were in the men's channel the other day, Connor, a question was asked of me of who do I think has had the sort of manager of the year out of the 2 Manchester United managers, out of Ten Hag and Skinner. And you and I both disagreed on this one because you would have given it to Ten Hag, but I gave it to Mark Skinner. And the reasons for that are very simple. Because Skinner and Manchester United won the FA Cup, and it was our first major trophy. And like, I don't think people always take it the way they should, these things. I think they're looking at, again, they get conflated, the success of the men's team and the success of the women's team, whilst forgetting the fact that they are poles apart still, because United women are still making their history. If you look back to all of the things that your parents and guardians have kept about you when you were younger, it was remembering what your first word was. Nobody cared what your second word was. They cared what your first word was. People were never interested in seeing your second step. They just wanted to see you take your first step. Everybody remembers who the first person they went out with was or kissed was. Everybody remembers their first car. Most people remember the first place they lived or the first school that they went to or the first teacher they really liked or the first teacher they hated. You always remember your first. And yes, the season as a whole, people will probably remember as being a little bit naff. But in 20 years' time, we're all going to be sitting there going, yep, 2024, the year that Manchester United women won their first ever trophy. And I think for me, that's the big thing. Everything else, I said this weeks before, if we win the FA Cup, we'll forget about the league. I've forgotten about it. I don't care. I remember how annoyed I was after that 6-0 loss against Chelsea. Wish it was a win. But even that's gone now, because now I look back at the season as a whole, that's the first time we won something. It's the first time we beat Chelsea. And now all of a sudden, those things need to take priority, because if you just sit back and look at all the negativity, what a crap life that is. I'm sorry. I don't know how people can live being negative, like consistently, just miserable, like Victor Meldrew. I don't understand it. You've got to have a bit of positivity in your life. It's like anything. You'll find what you want to find. If you try and look at things through a more positive point of view, you'll find things positive to be seen. If you decide you're going to look at it negatively, that's all you're ever going to see. And now the only thing to do is to look positively, because if we sit here and look negatively at what's about to happen, all we're going to see is the bad stuff. If somebody leaves, it's going to be a bad stuff. What we need to be looking at is the positivity. So is it a successful season? Yeah, because we won a trophy. And when was the last time we did that? A major trophy, not the championship, because to me that doesn't count. We were expected to win that. For me, the big thing is we won a trophy. The big thing that we've always said we wanted. We've had a day out where we've gone out and gone absolutely crazy. We owned it in their own backyard. Like, Tottenham literally play a stone's throw from Wembley. They used to play their home games, the men there at Wembley, in their own backyard. We took them apart. To me, that's success. You know, in 20 years' time, we're not going to be sitting here really talking about how crap the whole season was. We'll be going, yeah, we won the FA Cup in 2024, and nobody's going to be sitting there going, yeah, we also finished 5th below Liverpool. No. So, was it successful? Absolutely, yes.
You've almost sold me. I still side on. No, because I agree with you, and I think when we come back in 5 years, it's not going to matter really. You know, in terms of your league, unless we go on a massive downhill thing and then obviously drop away in the WSL, then this might be looked at as the turning point. Lowest ever finished, then we go on to keep finishing lower. You know, that might be the turning point. I don't want to sit on the fence. I do want to give an answer, but I'm like, I don't know, because it not only was it our lowest ever finish, our lowest points, it's our lowest record losses, it's the biggest ever defeat on the last game of the season. Like, there's too many things that went wrong, albeit how good the FA Cup was. And like I said, I wouldn't change that. If you offered me 6th in the cup again, oh yeah, I'm taking the cup just because of how good that day at Wembley was, and obviously the memories that came with it. So I'm sliding more towards maybe saying.
I heard a really interesting question the other day, scrolling through TikTok.
So torn.
And it was this idea of, would you accept being in the chance of winning the league but not winning it every single season for the rest of your life as a fan, but never winning any other cups? So you're in the fight, but you never win the league and you never win a cup. Or would you rather never be in the fight as, for winning the league, but always win a cup?
You got to cup win, don't you? You got it.
I know, and I know that's not how life works, but it was an interesting thing for me because in my head I sat there and I thought I would genuinely piss, basically. That's really good, well done. But that's what I went for. I went for, do you know what? I would want to win a cup every year because you're winning something and you feel good when you win. Well, you feel terrible. Like, last season was brilliant, but it ended so poorly because we didn't quite finish it. You know, we didn't quite win the league and we didn't quite win the FA Cup, and we were so close in both. But all that good joy and feeling and everything that we had leading up to it ultimately just ended up with us sitting there going, crap, that wasn't good. This season, we had all that rubbish behind us. It almost ended, apart from that 6-0 that's been watched 15 times by Tony, in a really good position. So for me, I think I would take that. If you said for the next 5 years you're going to win cups, but you're not going to come anywhere near it in the league, I'll take that because we're growing.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm going to have to side on successful on it, but I think there's a big asterisk. I said this after the loss. I think there's a big asterisk for me next to successful because I think. I don't know. I don't know. Right, let's. I think I'll answer after this next. But right, final question then. If you could rate the season out of 10 as a whole, not just the FA Cup, not just that, you've got to look at everything: Conti Cup, Champions League, performances, league form, FA Cup win, everything. If you put all that together, how would you, if you gave this season a rating, where would you put it on that scale?
I am going to say, can I go for a half number? Because I want to say 6.5, which I feel like is higher than I would have necessarily expected myself to go for. But it's the FA Cup. And again, I don't know, it was just such a great day, to be honest. But I can't, a 6. I'm going to go with 6 because I can't give it a 7. 7 is like decent. So for me, 6. Yeah, I'm gonna go 6. For me, if we hadn't have won the FA Cup, then it would be like a 2 or a 3. And you can bang on about the defeat to Chelsea until the cows come home. I'm not asked. For me, I'd rather win the FA Cup than beat Chelsea 1-0 in that game, because I think we all need to remember that that game meant nothing to any of us, to be honest. Whilst we all said before the game we didn't want to be embarrassed, and we were embarrassed, I don't think a single person expected us to win that game because we'd just won the FA Cup. I don't think at that point anyone particularly cared. It would have just been nice to not get embarrassed.
I cared. I didn't want them to hold that trophy up at Old Trafford at all. That really annoyed me, and we should have done better. But I find it really hard to rate out of 10. That wasn't good. And you watched my show yesterday, so I'm a little bit frustrated at you for just letting us do it out of 10. So what I've done is I've done the whole thing out of 100 and put the Conti Cup out of 20, the FA Cup out of 20, the Champions League out of 20, the League out of 20, and then sort of the team morale as a whole and all of that sort of thing. I came up with a 9 out of 20 for the Conti. You know, I don't think we did that terribly. It was an administrative error, like I said. Obviously, 20 out of 20 for the FA Cup because that was just bloody marvellous. I've given us 5 for the Champions League. We didn't really get there, did we? 10 for the league because we didn't get relegated. We were just mid-table, so that's 10 out of 20. And the team a 10 as well because there were some brilliant moments and there were just some moments where it wasn't great, which adds up to 54. So I'm going to round that to a half point like Jess did. I'm actually going to give it 5.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say 6 before I asked that question because I was very much just like, I'm with Jess. I think if we didn't win the cup, let's just say we lost to Chelsea or to Brighton, that probably would have been about a 3 or a 4, to be honest, when you're looking at the season there. But yeah, I think there's just been too many, especially at the start of the season, there was too much noise around United. There's been too much upheaval behind the scenes and otherwise, obviously, you know, with various things. And I don't think that's how we were either. I think there's going to be a bit more upheaval this summer with obviously Ineos' first big summer and people kind of coming in and new structures and all kinds of things going on there. So yeah, I think 6 is probably about fair when we're looking at the team. True's gone for a 3. There's a couple of 4s, a couple of 5s. Yes, TJ saying 6 about right. There's a 7 and a 5, a 6. Paul's also gone for a 3. Twilumber, of course, you've gone for a -1. 7, 4. Yeah, I think. And Michael's also going for a 5 as well. Is there any more? Oh yeah, there's a few more. He's going to scroll up here. 5, a 4, and a 7. Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of between 4 and 7, aren't they? I think on that one, no one's really gone higher than the 7. No one's really gone lower than the 4, with the exception of a couple of people.
Play your cards right. There's higher than a 7, lower than a 7.
So yeah, I think that's about fair. But what can we do? Right, we'll round it off there because I said to Jess before we went live, I was like, "This is not going to be too long. You can have a relaxing evening and things like that." And what, an hour and 37 minutes.
Jess didn't believe you when you said that because you're just a compulsive liar.
Yeah, no, I didn't believe you for a single second, to be honest. No, I was like, that's going to be at least 90 minutes.
You also said it at the beginning of the show, which is why I was like this. I'm like, he won't learn, really. If he just shut up and didn't say it, we'd probably all finish early. But now it's almost like, oh, I've got to keep it talking a bit because he's only got a few questions. But, such hard work.
But there we go. So yes, we'll wrap it up there. Make sure you're liking the video, subscribing, all that kind of stuff. It's been great to be back, by the way. It does feel like it's been a while. And yeah, we do miss doing them. Obviously, we're kind of waiting on United, to be honest, in terms of or just getting some news out there. You know, we've got some other shows and some things lined up over the summer anyway to keep us going when the news is a bit quiet and things like that. So look out for things like that. If you've got any shows that you want to see, drop it in the replies in the comments of this video, and we'll try and put some of those shows together. Everyone loves Conti.
Tony's not wrong here. This is absolutely spot on. Whereas here, it's perfect. Everyone loves Connor, but keeping it quick isn't his forte. And going on with the 3 hour TikTok live. But I mean, he's unreal. You know what's going to happen next? There's videos of you just sleeping, isn't there? So you've got 8 hour TikTok lives. Just really get those likes in. Oh yeah, his hair does stay upright while he's sleeping. That's amazing. Good old Johnny Bravo.
But yeah, so it's been great to see you all back in the chat again. As I said, this isn't going to be the last show. We'll have something in potentially next week if there's some news announced. Obviously, we're getting into transfer season, as Barry says, so we'll have journalists on over the summer and experts of players and things like that as we start to get linked to more and more players. So there's going to be all that kind of stuff. If you're not already following, obviously, All for Women's Football as well, we've been doing some stuff over there. We did a draft show again on Monday, which was a lot of fun. So you can go and watch that. And there's also some shows, some interviews with players coming out on there over the next kind of couple of weeks as well. So if that's more your thing and you like women's football as a broader term, we've got a lot of, and when I say a lot, we're potentially coming up to 2-3 shows a week over the next few weeks because we've got a lot of potentially stuff coming out on there. So if that's more your forte, whack over there, and you can go and give those a watch. As we just mentioned there, the TikTok as well. There's obviously lives going out on there and a lot of other content going out. The Instagram, the Twitter, all at All for United WFC. I said, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and all that kind of stuff. We're kind of aiming for 3K before the end of the year, unofficially. That's kind of a target I've little set myself. So if you could drop a subscribe, because there's at least 60% of you that watch our videos are not subscribed. So if you could, that would be massively helpful on that one. Appreciate you all in the chat. It's been great having you all back in again and seeing all of your lovely comments. As always, thanks to Barry and Jess for getting a Thursday evening chatting with us. We should see you guys. Don't know exactly when. It'll be some point next week.